So we're at the barbecue contest in Georgia, Calhoun. Really going to get a jump start on building my boxes. That way I can get them in a Ziploc bag, store them, and not have to worry about it. There'll be 4 boxes for this competition. Right now, I'm just going to get enough packed in there and then get it situated. I have these set in this just so the styrofoam doesn't blow away, but we're still fighting with wind. Let's see, what, today's Friday, so I bought this kale Thursday. And what I'll probably do is get a paper towel and I'll fill my spritz bottle up and actually spray that and then put a damp paper towel in this and then store it in the cooler. So the way I start out, I just want to get kale in here and then I start packing it in. It can be tight. For chicken, we tend to build the boxes up high a little bit. Right now, the way most ribs get turned in are usually like 5 bones down and 5 bones up, so we tend to not to build it too high. Chicken we can, so ribs we tend to have a little bit less packed. You can actually set things in here and weigh it down a little bit for ribs and other meats. All the judge is going to look at is this illegal garnishment. So I don't want a bunch of stems like that sticking out. I only want the leaf part of it. They're not going to see a whole lot sticking out, but what they do see, I still want it to look, they're still going to judge it based on legality of it. And stems aren't allowed. So you tend to want, fresh kale. One of the things that helps me prepare for a contest is knowing my timelines. I usually have a 3-ring binder, and in this binder I have my injection times, when I'm going to build my boxes, when I'm going to light my pits, and what time the meat goes on. So here we're injecting our brisket. It's probably around 8 or 8:30 in the evening, and we're going to go ahead and inject this and then let it rest all the way through the night and into the morning. And probably one of the things I usually would recommend, at least just kind of preparing for most people who haven't done a contest before, is just prepare for a very long day. Here we're seasoning our brisket. I believe it's, let's say we got back to our site at 4 o'clock, and I believe we're lighting our first pit barrel at 5:30. And I'm going to go ahead and pull the brisket out, pat it dry. Of course, I'm seasoning it with our hickory rub. And of course, if you know anything about the pit barrels, you can set those on the grates or hook and hang right over the charcoal, which is basically a hot fast method for brisket. And in my very first contest, I did not know what hot and fast was. So I usually recommend, at least for most competitors, to know and understand what hot and fast is for brisket, and of course if you do a whole pork butt. Here we're just focusing on the money muscle. And so knowing the KCBS rules for contest as far as turn-ins and preparation for meats and weights and things like that. A lot of rules have changed over the years. The old rule used to be was the pork butt had to be, no less than 4 pounds, but that rule has changed and there's no rule on that. So a lot of competitors are just focusing on certain parts of the pork. My focus was the money muscle, just because it's going to get done a lot faster. And of course, like I said, I have my timeline. I know when I'm going to inject my ribs. I know how long they're going to rest. I know exactly when they're going to go on the pit barrel. I have an estimated time of the start and stop, and I've allotted extra time in case for some reason the cook is going slow, whether it's weather increments or maybe just having an issue with the temperatures in one of your smokers. But I don't always inject my ribs, but this was more like I guess a game time decision. So we've got our brisket on, we're getting our money muscle on. Now it's time to inject chicken. This was actually a backyard contest I did, but since we were vending and selling our barbecue sauces and rubs, my main focus arriving to this contest was chicken and ribs. Pork, of course, was part of the other category, and our brisket was actually an extra. You can pay $25 to compete in that one. I wanted to because later on in the year I'm going to compete in more contests. One which obviously brisket will be a category, and I thought, well, I wouldn't mind being judged on this and seeing how my flavor profile and everything turns out. So, it's time for the brisket to come off. Again, compared to my first contest I ever did 4 years ago, I did not have start and stop times. I did not have estimated times when I'm going to wrap and rest, things like that. Really, all through this whole contest, it didn't feel like I was under pressure like I was in my first one. And it's simply because I was following my timeline and I was running right on schedule. I brought some extra au jus with me. It's one thing that I highly recommend. Prepping for a contest is that. It's preparing and planning and writing a game plan out for what you're going to do. And I have all my rubs together. I have all my injections together. I have what I'm going to put in my wrap for the ribs, how I'm going to, what I'm going to inject my chicken with, the whole 9 yards. So I know exactly what I'm going to do through the whole process, as opposed to my first one where I just kind of showed up and literally almost just kind of winged it. So, I'm right here, I'm prepping for the ribs. They're getting ready to go on. I like for my ribs to at least rest for 30 to 45 minutes prior to putting them in my pit barrel. And so I think this contest I actually seasoned with hickory, but in my other contests from doing other practice runs, I'm going to actually season with more of like a sweet heat mesquite. And then here we are getting our money muscle on. I actually thought we had already put it on earlier, but then again, I'm just kind of going from memory. But again, that's why you have a timeline, and I highly recommend like a journal so you can take notes either throughout the contest or after, so you know what works and what doesn't. So basically, you're working under pressure because you're going to put meat on and it's got to be done at a certain time and turned in at a certain time. A lot of people don't realize that KCBS contest, the turn-in times are 12, 12:31, and 1:30, but there's a 5-minute window prior and a 5-minute window after. So you kind of want to prepare for when you're going to slice and when you're going to start your boxes. And if you are like me, sometimes you like to set the glaze, put it back on the smoker just so it finishes the sauce out. I don't know what time it is here, but we're putting our money muscles on, and I don't all the time use a oven thermometer, but sometimes I do. This contest, I brought one just in case, so I thought I would actually use it in the pit barrel that I use for the money mussel, just to kind of gauge it. My ribs, I just basically, I'll hang those in my pit barrel, and when the rub is set, I will wrap those and finish those out on the grate until they hit a, not really a desired temp, but the doneness, the tenderness, the probe tenderness that I want. But back to the KCBS rules, you can do all your trimming prior to a contest. So I had done a YouTube video on just kind of like a checklist. I have a little tackle box, and I will go through that thing 2 or 3 times, 3 or 4 days prior to leaving for a contest to make sure I've got all my temperature gauges, whether I need toothpicks to probe for tenderness, injection needles. At this context, I actually wish my injector broke, so I wish I would have brought at least one extra injector. So things like that happen at a contest. Things don't always run, like you plan. So you got to have a plan A and a B. And in this case, I do remember our injector, something happened with the handle, and I was thinking, man, I didn't bring an extra one. So I have a checklist I go through, and I make sure I have all my equipment in my totes. Make sure I do a run through on all my thermometers. Here's another tip. I had a thermometer, actually, I swore I put new batteries in it, but during the process, it kept acting funny. And the reason why I say that is because I used my other ThermoWorks pin, that one, to actually check, and I was getting a more accurate reading. So I either didn't have my probe in correctly, or it's a Maverick thermometer I've had for years, so it might be going bad. So there's all sorts of little checks I do prior to the contest. But on Sunday, prior to the contest, to Wednesday, I prepare to do all my trimming and all my meat preps. You just can't inject or season anything. But one of the things I also recommend is getting a vacuum sealer, because you can actually do all your trimmings, vacuum seal if you need to put in the freezer or the fridge. And the next contest I do, I'm going to do all my prep Wednesday before I leave on Friday. So I can let that set in my vacuum seal, in the fridge, and I've got it all ready. I just got to throw it in the cooler. We're doing chicken thighs here. The next contest, I'm going to do drumsticks. I wish these would have came out as far as, I always preach about uniformity. You want everything looking even and identical to one another, but sometimes that's just the way the cooking process goes. I just focused on the tenderness and the flavor, and figured I'd still put a good box together for the judges. And the minimum requirement is 6 pieces in a box. So you can put more than that if you can get in a box. For our chicken, we did 6. For our ribs, we did 8, and I wish the box would have looked a little bit better. There's probably some extra trimming I need to go back through and just kind of dial my rib cook in. And as far as the trimming and meat prep, overall, I'm very happy how actually our ribs turned out. And I hadn't competed in 4 years. I tell everybody I did 2 contests, but I really did 1. There's a backstory on the second one, and it's an interesting story. I may save that one for later, but a lot of the pictures I see in ribs, they either go 4 or 5 down and then 4 or 5 up, so they get 9 or 10 in. And I think the next time I actually do this box up, my kill is going to be a little bit higher on the sides. I'm going to trim them so they're not as long. I've noticed a lot of other competitors, the ribs will actually be just a little shorter. So again, uniformity. I've got one rib here that's a little bit longer, And I've got one rib here that's a little bit longer. And of course, putting these in here, I noticed that they did stand up a little bit higher than I wanted to. But I don't worry about if sauce touches the top of the box or on the side. You're not going to get dinged on that. They've been really teaching judges to, just judge the meat. You can see I have one rib that doesn't set here quite the way I want it, but compared to my first contest I ever did, I didn't even practice box building, but it's something I definitely recommend in all my videos. If you check any of our YouTube videos out, I'm always trying to build a box. And it's funny because, well, at home you can build a beautiful box, but you get in a parking lot and, 3 hours away, and, you go to bed at 10:30 at night and then get up at 2:45, and then you're cooking till your last turn in at 1:30, and then, it makes for a very long day. So you're on your feet and you're doing a lot of work. Just a kind of a KCBS tip here, where I became a certified judge. There's actually no rule in the thickness or thinness in trimming, your money muscle, your brisket slices, but I do try to keep them as close to being even as possible. So having these boards where they have kind of a measurement out really helps. This was my highest place box. I always talk about focusing on one meat, maybe even, two parts of the pork butt. Here I just focused on literally just the money muscle, because I just didn't want to give the judge any other chance to kind of ding me on. Brisket, we don't turn in burnt ends. Sometimes they come out great, sometimes they don't, but it's kind of hard to hit a high score with judges. If you can have 4 really good burnt ends and 2 of them could be really tough. Here I'm actually trying to keep a pencil width as far as the thickness, but I could have adjusted the thinness or thickness. I'm not the best with an electric knife. These came out a little too thick. The tenderness was good. Flavor, I think it needed a little bit of work on, and I needed to trim them down just a little bit better. But thanks for watching, and check our YouTube videos out.